Most people believe that the most dangerous crimes happen in dark alleys or abandoned places, far away from ordinary life. But sometimes the most disturbing crimes unfold quietly, right in front of everyone, hidden behind polite smiles and normal routines. This is one of those stories, a case so twisted that even experienced investigators struggled to understand what they were looking at, because nothing about it followed the rules of a typical murder. And for years almost no one outside a small town ever heard about it. It began in a place where nothing ever seemed to happen. A quiet town, with familiar streets, where neighbors recognized each other's footsteps and evenings passed without surprises. In this town lived a man named Daniel Hartwell. He was ordinary in every visible way. He worked a stable job, paid his bills on time, and spoke politely to everyone he met. People described him as calm, dependable, and forgettable, and that was exactly what made him invisible. The first sign that something was wrong came when a woman named Laura Mendez failed to show up for work. Laura was known for being punctual. She never missed a shift, never ignored messages, and never disappeared without explanation. When she didn't answer her phone for an entire day, her co-workers assumed something minor had happened. By the second day, concern turned into fear. By the third day, police were called. Laura's apartment showed no signs of a struggle. Her keys were on the counter. Her wallet was untouched. Her phone was placed neatly beside her bed. It looked as if she had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. But one detail stood out to investigators. On her kitchen table was a small notebook, open to a single page. On it was written one sentence, carefully and slowly, as if the writer wanted it to be read many times. "I finally understand him." At first, police assumed it was a personal note, perhaps something emotional or unrelated. But as days passed with no sign of Laura, that sentence began to feel unsettling. Who was him? And what did she finally understand? Weeks later, the case took a turn that no one expected. Another person vanished. This time, it was a man named Kevin Brooks, who lived across town and had no known connection to Laura. His disappearance followed the same pattern. No forced entry, no missing valuables, no obvious reason to leave. And again a message was left behind. Written on a piece of paper taped to his refrigerator were the words, "He showed me the truth." Now investigators were alarmed. 2 disappearances, 2 messages, both vague, both referring to the same unknown person. And both victims seemed to have left willingly. Police began digging into the victims' lives, searching for any overlap. At first, nothing appeared. Different jobs, different social circles, different routines. But eventually, a small connection emerged. Both Laura and Kevin had attended a local community workshop months earlier. It was advertised as a self-improvement discussion group, free to attend, led by a volunteer facilitator. The name of that facilitator was Daniel Hartwell. When detectives looked into Daniel, they found nothing alarming. No criminal history, no complaints, no suspicious behavior. He had led several discussion groups over the years, always focused on communication, trust, and personal clarity. Former attendees described him as a good listener, someone who made people feel understood. One person said, "Talking to him felt like he could see parts of you that others missed." Police questioned Daniel casually at first. He cooperated fully. He acknowledged knowing both Laura and Kevin, but insisted he hadn't seen them in months. He spoke calmly, never defensive, never nervous. His answers were thoughtful, measured, and precise. Investigators left the interview with no clear reason to suspect him further. Then a third disappearance happened. This time, it was different. The missing person was a teenage girl named Emily Rowe. Her parents reported her missing after she failed to return home from school. Her backpack was found in her bedroom. Her bed was neatly made, and on her desk was a folded note. Unlike the others, this one was longer. It read, "He says fear is the last thing to let go of. I'm ready now." The town was no longer calm. Fear spread quickly. Parents kept their children inside. Rumors exploded. Some believed a cult was operating in secret. Others believed a serial manipulator was convincing people to disappear voluntarily. Police pressure intensified, and Daniel Hartwell became the center of attention. Investigators returned to Daniel's home with a warrant. What they found inside was not violent or chaotic. There were no weapons, no restraints, no blood. Instead, they found shelves filled with journals, dozens of them, each carefully labeled with dates and names. Some names were crossed out, others were circled. Inside the journals were detailed notes about conversations Daniel had with people. He wrote about their fears, their regrets, their loneliness. He analyzed their personalities, their vulnerabilities, and what words seemed to affect them the most. He wasn't recording crimes, he was documenting influence. One entry stood out. Next to Laura's name, Daniel had written, "Subject reached acceptance after phase 3. No resistance. Complete trust." Next to Kevin's name, the note read, "Subject questioned reality. Progress slower but successful." And next to Emily's name, the words were chilling. "Subject young, but deeply aware. High potential." Still, there was no physical evidence linking Daniel to the disappearances. No proof that he had harmed anyone. No proof that he had forced them to leave. Legally, he had done nothing obvious wrong. But investigators knew they were looking at something far more disturbing than a typical murder case. Because the question was no longer whether Daniel Hartwell had killed these people. The question was whether he had convinced them to erase themselves completely. And that was only the beginning. As investigators dug deeper, they realized this was not a case built on violence, but on patience. Daniel Hartwell had never rushed anyone. He didn't threaten, isolate, or demand obedience in obvious ways. Instead, he listened. He let people talk until they revealed the parts of themselves they had never said out loud. And then, slowly, he reflected those thoughts back to them, in a way that made his words feel like their own. Former workshop attendees were interviewed again, this time more thoroughly. Many admitted that after spending time with Daniel, they had felt strangely changed. Not frightened, but lighter. Some said he encouraged them to question their routines, their identities, and the expectations placed on them by others. He never told them to disappear. He simply asked questions like, "If no one expected anything from you, who would you become?" Over time, those questions stayed with them. Police discovered that Daniel often met people one-on-one after the workshops ended. These meetings were informal, always in public places at first. Cafes, parks, libraries. Witnesses remembered seeing him sit quietly, while the other person talked endlessly. He rarely interrupted. He never judged. That silence, investigators later concluded, was his most powerful tool. What made the case even more disturbing was the pattern in the disappearances. Each person vanished shortly after a final private conversation with Daniel. Phone records confirmed it. Security footage placed them together days before each disappearance, and yet, no evidence showed Daniel following them afterward. It was as if his involvement ended the moment they walked away. Then came the first major break in the case. A woman named Rachel Owens contacted police after seeing a news report about Daniel. She claimed she had attended his workshop years earlier and nearly disappeared herself. According to Rachel, Daniel had helped her through a difficult period in her life. Over months of conversations, he convinced her that her pain came from living a life shaped by others. He encouraged her to imagine a version of herself with no past, no labels, no obligations. At first it felt empowering, but one night, Rachel said something changed. Daniel asked her a question that terrified her. He asked, "If you vanished tomorrow, would anyone truly lose you, or would they only miss the idea of you?" That question stayed with her. She began distancing herself from friends. She stopped answering calls. She started preparing to leave without telling anyone. What stopped her was fear, not of Daniel but of what she was becoming. Rachel's statement confirmed investigators' worst suspicion. Daniel wasn't forcing people to disappear. He was guiding them to the idea so carefully that they believed it was their own decision. Police arrested Daniel on suspicion of involvement in multiple disappearances, but the legal case was fragile. During interrogation, Daniel remained calm. He denied harming anyone. He admitted to deep conversations, but argued that words were not crimes. He stated, "People are responsible for their own choices, and legally he wasn't wrong." Then something unexpected happened. 3 months after Daniel's arrest, Laura Mendez was found alive. She was located in a remote coastal town, living under a different name, working a simple job and avoiding all contact with her former life. When police approached her, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't confused. She was angry. She refused to return home and insisted she had not been kidnapped or harmed. She said she left because she wanted to, and that Daniel had helped her see a truth she had been avoiding. But when investigators pressed further, cracks began to show. Laura admitted she had been told to cut off all contact, to never explain herself, and to believe that anyone who tried to bring her back was trying to control her. Those ideas hadn't come from nowhere. They had been planted, reinforced, and shaped over time. Laura agreed to testify. Her testimony changed everything. She described how Daniel slowly dismantled her sense of identity, how he praised her when she distanced herself from others, how he framed disappearance as freedom, not loss, and how he made leaving feel like a necessary step toward becoming complete. Soon after, Kevin Brooks was also found. He had traveled across several countries, living quietly, avoiding attention. Like Laura, he insisted his departure was voluntary. Like Laura, he admitted Daniel had guided him there mentally long before he left physically. Emily Rowe, however, was never found. The trial became one of the most unsettling legal battles the town had ever seen. Prosecutors argued that Daniel committed psychological murder, destroying lives without ever touching a weapon. The defense argued that influence was not a crime, and that every person who left did so by choice. In the end, Daniel Hartwell was convicted on limited charges related to manipulation and endangerment, but not murder. His sentence was shorter than many expected. As he was led away, he showed no anger, no regret, only quiet satisfaction. Years later, investigators reflected on the case, not as a mystery of violence, but of control. Daniel never needed chains, threats, or blood. He understood something far more dangerous, that with enough patience and the right words, you can convince a person to erase themselves willingly. And somewhere out there, the question still lingers. How many people truly disappeared because they wanted to, and how many were simply talked into believing they did?